I blame kind of a lot of sides on this, but I definitely blame the lack of funding. As someone who's worked in like alternative media for many, many years, funders don't fund media. It's very difficult to get funding for a podcast or a channel or like some kind of, or in my world, magazines, right?
Francesca Fiorentini and Sam Seder cope and seethe over the fact that right-wing media seems to be doing a lot more better than the left-wing media. You would think that Francesca and Sam Seder would actually consider that maybe our messaging just isn't resonating. But of course not. Of course, they just blame everything else other than what's right in front of them, and that is that their messaging sucks. But don't take my word for it. See for yourself what Francesca Fiorentini and Sam Seder have to say during this cope session.
Talk to you because I've been bitching about this report ever since it came out. Media Matters put out this study entitled "The Right Dominates Online Media, the Online Media Ecosystem Seeping into Sports Comedy and Other Supposedly Non-Political Spaces." Now, to make my bitching sort of expedient, I want to say that I like this study. I think it's good that it happened. They say, like, okay, we're going to study online media, especially podcasts and YouTube. But specifically YouTube, Rumble, video platforms, and they are not going to look at major news outlets like The Daily, right? Or anything that has the backing of like actual facts or news and whatnot. But that's fine. And they came away with the fact that right-wing outlets are totally dominating. Right-wing perspectives are dominating the field here. And, there's Trevor Noah's pretty big in terms of the liberal left space. They have PodSave on here. They're a bitty dot. And I think the Majority Report. Never heard of that show, but a little bitty dot on the Majority Report. And then I don't think the Bituation Room made the cut, but that's okay. They looked at 320 online shows and came away with that there's 101 right-leaning and 129 left-leaning that were active. But the asymmetry on the amount of people tuning in is huge. So the right-leaning online shows had 480.6 million total followers, nearly 5 times as many as left-leaning shows. And my critique,
maybe that should be a sign that the right-wing messaging is just better than the left-wing messaging, that maybe people are tired of your crap, and that the right-wing messaging, it just resonates with more people. Like, maybe that should be your takeaway. But it's Francesca Fiorentini over here. Do we really think that that's going to be her logical takeaway here?
are a couple, and then I want your thoughts. My critiques that I find this overall, the whole thing is obnoxious to me because it basically reinforces the idea that the left is a nothing burger on the media level. And I don't think that's totally honest, because I do think there are a lot of shows and podcasts that are pop culture, fashion, celebrity, that are kind of lib coded, but aren't actually political, right? So I don't think that this takes into that big totality, whatnot. And then I also don't love that they just immediately called the Breakfast Club like lib, whereas Theo Vaughn is right leaning. You could argue Theo Vaughn's right leaning. Let's look up the people he's had on. There's a lot of comedians, but then of course there's like Candace Owens,
Dave Smith,
but like Dave Smith. But there's a lot of, it's mostly comics, right? And then Hassan was on the other day.
Yeah.
Tom Green is back on. So there's another thing that happens when we start to like label certain shows as being necessarily right and necessarily left. That being said, Rogan became what people thought he was. When they labeled him as right, he kind of just leaned into it. And
well, I don't think I would not say that's a causal connection, to be honest with you, but.
Oh, you don't think that's a causal connection? Yeah, Joe Rogan, like 10 years ago, you would never think that he was a right winger by any means. But when he started coming out against, like, the jab, for instance, well then, yeah, you guys, again, because of your nonstop purity testing, you guys kicked him out and you pushed him more toward our side. You got to remember, he didn't even endorse Donald Trump until like the final freaking hour. It was a last minute thing that he endorsed Trump. Right up until then, he was talking about RFK Jr. and such. But if you asked anyone from the left, yeah, they would say, oh, Joe Rogan's right-leaning, right-leaning. Same thing like what they did to Anna Kasparian. Anna Kasparian's a right-winger to these people now. But to these people who are so extreme on the left, anyone to the right of them, oh yeah, they're right-wing.
Well, that's what I was curious about, because there's part of me that's like, oh, don't call Theo Von right-wing, because maybe he'll just like become even more right-wing. But I think that there is
that trajectory happens, in regardless. I think there was an inevitability for a lot of these people. I mean, first off, I will also say that we need to keep in mind, and Milo Yiannopoulos actually was very explicit about this on his last visit, I think, on Tim Pool's show.
Yeah,
he explicitly said that, and I can't remember who it was. He said it was a billionaire who pumped a bunch of money into Ben Shapiro's show.
Yeah.
And then he said, in general, he said, we on the right, we fake it till we make it. In other words, we're going to buy viewers. We're going to buy downloads. It's going to put us on the top of these charts. And then you can slowly stop buying them as people like, oh, wait, this is the most popular show. I start to watch it. Right. That's the way these things were built. And
it doesn't show you the backers, right? Yeah, the money behind it.
Well, it doesn't show you that, like, what basically happens. They're popped to the top by right-wing money. And then, there is a bias in this country that, if you're in the top 10 in, iTunes, or if you're a top 10 in YouTube, you get passed around. I mean, we both know the whims of the algorithm, and the fact of the matter is, if you get, it's much easier to get, 50,000 views if there's 40,000 fake ones. You're going to attract more people. It just
isn't that the New York Times bestseller game too? Of like,
yes,
turns out this one person just bought a bunch of copies of Matt Walsh's book.
100%. And, Milo Yiannopoulos is basically has decided he's going to go rogue in certain these situations, and he gave away the game. That doesn't mean that these people don't have those audiences, but it means that their growth was inorganic. And
this just sounds like a lot of cope. I mean, yeah, like what Sam's saying is not completely untrue. I've heard that there is someone that is dumping money into right-wing sources. It's the PayPal guy, Peter Thiel. I forgot his name, but that's what I've heard. I haven't really done any deep research into this. That's just what I've heard, so take what I say with a grain of salt. With that said, though, if it was just all about who pumps more money into something, well, then all of these left-wing podcasts would be more successful. The Michelle Obama podcast would be more successful. The Gavin Newsom podcast would be more successful. And how come is it that there's a lot of right-wing YouTubers that are like hard to find in the algorithm? So no, it's not all about just who has money being pumped into them or not. It's just that the right wing's messaging is just better than the left wing's messaging.
That's to be kept in mind. We can argue about the taxonomy. And we can argue, I don't know if Media Matters labeling Theo Von is going to push him to the right or to the left. I mean, who knows with these people? My sense is that, like, your politics come out over time. But a lot of these people want success. Well, and there's money in them, their hills.
100%. There's a few dynamics, and we got to move on. But I blame kind of a lot of sides on this, but I definitely blame the lack of funding. As someone who's worked in like alternative media for many, many years, funders don't fund media. It's very difficult to get funding for a podcast or a channel or like some kind of, or in my world, magazines, right? Really, really difficult to get foundation money for that kind of stuff. In other words, the good billionaires or the good donors or any of the people like the Mercer family, bolstering, the far right or other folks who are behind the scenes, or, your random Russian oligarch and such. But it is important to understand, first of all this is very male coded. I just want to name that. And that like the female coded stuff is, again, much more pop culture, that like stuff that I don't really touch, but it is, again, kind of lib. It is more progressive leaning. And what annoys me is that when those when those pop culture shows, and sort of putting it on the libs, when they get really big, they become allergic to politics almost by necessity. They're like, well, we don't want to lose sponsors. We don't want to lose our money. We don't want to lose our bag. Like, we will not touch politics. We are a massive YouTube show, and we make shows about like cooking and being stupid, whatever. And we will not touch politics. And the right does not see that distinction. The right is like, no. Once you get big enough, you should be interviewing Donald Trump. You should be interviewing, whomever, right? You should be interviewing these right-wing folks. And I'm sure that all their managers and all their bookers are sort of the same little like incestuous little pool.
What about Kamala Harris doing an SNL appearance right before the election? What about Kamala Harris going on, the Who's Your Daddy podcast? What about that? They're acting like if left-wingers don't get platformed or something like that. They absolutely get platformed. And by the way, Kamala Harris was welcome on the Joe Rogan show, but she put all these conditions that she didn't do it. Probably because she knew that she couldn't last in an interview.
It's annoying because if you're a Democrat or you're a liberal, you just, by virtue of being that big, you think that you can't touch the political rail because it'll screw you over, when actually it might be critical to do that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I just think there isn't, and I just don't think there's the same economic reward structure on the broadly left as the broadly right. I mean, when cancel culture came up, I was like, we always have had cancel culture. It's just that it's a different set of people now who are being held to account because things have been more democratized.
No, but it's also like people are just not laughing at your shitty joke anymore, and they have every right to not do that.
But my point being that, the Smothers Brothers, they got canceled, and by Nixon, 60 years ago. There's a lot of people you've never heard of because they're not even going to get in the door because of their politics.
Yep.
And so, I think that dynamic exists. I mean, I think it's wrong, but there have been differences. Look at what's his face? Bulworth. I mean, this is an old example, but it's an absent. And I think like someone like Matt Damon sometimes does some of that. At least publicly he'll speak out, but hasn't necessarily had projects that would go that way. So I don't know.
How about like the Oscars or all these award ceremonies that are pretty much nothing but just a bunch of lefty celebrities just going up, just saying how much Orange Man is bad. That's pretty much what all of these award shows have become. And their ratings are tanking. I mean, yes, he is right. It is more economically rewarding for right-wingers, but it's not. It's because our messages are just better and more grounded in common sense, where you're telling us that we should just ignore our lying eyes and ears and just trust the government or the scientists and whatnot, and just do whatever they say, whether or not it goes against our common sense or not. Like I said, the sooner you guys realize this and jump off of that sinking ship, I mean, listen, you guys are free to go down with the ship if you want. But the sooner you realize that, the more, maybe the more successful you'll be. But what do you guys think? Sound off in the comment section below. Smash that like button if you enjoyed this. And if you really enjoyed it, please consider subscribing to my channel. I have more from Francesca Fiorentini and Sam Seder where they look like idiots. And if you like seeing them look like idiots, well, then my channel's the place for you.